Before this episode begins, over the next couple of months, I am looking specifically for parents, educators, and librarians whose lives or whose children's lives have been personally impacted by book bans. If you have a story you are willing to share publicly and to appear on camera using a first name basis, please reach out to bookfairpod@gmail.com, subject line Banned Books Week. Welcome to the Book Fair Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have more schools reporting AI-generated mistakes in course materials. Conservative groups get a taste of their own medicine as the King James Bible is challenged in Missouri, and Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Ken Paxton, proclaims, "We are coming for the books." Coming this Friday, we have an interview with Sandra Mag-Salmon. But first, let's begin this week by looking at new releases, starting with The Brunch Shift by Adrienne Thurman and illustrated by Mags DeRoma. This sweetly empathetic story from Thurman and DeRoma sees an ordinary workday become an imaginative adventure. Each Saturday, a young narrator accompanies Mama to the diner for the egg-crackin', pancake-flippin', orange-juicin' brunch shift, a shift Mama cannot afford to miss. Though this constraint shapes their routine, the pair reframe the day through inventive play, becoming knights and detectives, and turning bus rides and back halls into spaces of possibility. An undercurrent of longing accompanies other imaginings. Sometimes I imagine I'm here with the families in Mama's section, cheering hot chocolate and laughing. But when the shift is over, a final stop reveals Mama's further effort at making for a lively Saturday. Mixed media illustrations with handmade textures shift fluidly between grounded real-life scenes and flights of fancy, capturing both the tender intentionality of the Black duo's bond and the contrast between the fantasy and their reality. Balancing honesty about a family's financial necessity with their devotion to affection and innovation. The story celebrates engineering magic in shared moments. Secondary characters are portrayed with various skin tones, and this book is recommended for ages 4 to 8. Next is Freedom to Read, the story of teacher Mary Peake and One Mighty Oak Tree, by Lesa Cline-Ransome and illustrated by James E. Ransom. A child and a tree mature to reveal an interconnected legacy in the married collaborators' nuanced biography of a teacher named Mary Peake. As the rich soil of Hampton, Virginia, nurtures an acorn sprouting into an oak tree, Peake is born to a free, colored mother in the same state, and later rises to the top of her class at school. After an 1831 rebellion by enslaved men prompts Virginia lawmakers to outlaw education for colored, enslaved, and free people, young Peake uses her family's parlor to teach illegally. When war breaks out, Hampton's Fort Monroe becomes a refuge for people escaping their enslavers, and Peake is named as educator for the camp's newly established school, where she soon begins teaching under an oak tree, which later becomes the site of a reading of the Emancipation Proclamation and shares land with HBCU Hampton University. As delicately detailed watercolor and pencil illustrations employ an expressive color palette of blues, golds, and greens, extended free verse text twines the spreads together with repeated terms, while brief interstitials touch on the oak's life, spotlighting a living historical landmark and a pioneering teacher. It's a thoughtful double portrait that reaches forward and back. Background characters are portrayed with various skin tones. An author's note concludes, and this book is recommended for ages 4 to 8. Next is The Magic Library of Waterfall Way by Julie Abe. An orphaned tween seeking a place to belong embarks on a daunting adventure in this cozy fantasy from Abe. In the Altarian Empire, social standing is determined by citizens' ranking on a scale of remarkableness. Extraordinarily remarkables live in luxury, while slightly remarkables wear hand-me-downs. 11-year-old Lyra Hunt, described with tan skin, is an exceptional case. She's the only resident classified as unremarkable, leaving her feeling isolated and overlooked. As her birthday approaches, Lyra is running out of time to join a guild. But being accepted into one of the organizations dedicated to several professions would require her permanent shelter within the kingdom and keep her evading exile. Rejections pile up until she stumbles upon the elusive Guild of Scholars, where she discovers a wary but welcoming community of book lovers and knowledge seekers, along with a magical library. To gain acceptance, Lyra must restore the library's lost magic crystal, which amplifies guild members' magic and recently vanished in a fire. With help from new allies and a mischievous, furry companion, Lyra sets out on a quest boasting dragons, hidden stories, and an ancient society with secrets of its own. Whimsical world-building and an endearing protagonist distinguish a winning adventure that celebrates curiosity and personal exploration. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 11. Next is Raise the Bar by Fernanda Frick H. A teenage amateur athlete experiences setbacks on her journey toward competing professionally in this exceptional graphic novel debut. Chilean weightlifter Sam yearns to gain acceptance into the High Performance Center, an elite facility where young Latin American athletes train to qualify for the Olympics. While her parents begrudgingly allow her to frequent a nearby gym, they discourage her from pursuing competitive weightlifting. With her older brother's help, Sam secretly attends HPC tryouts, where she impresses and soon finds herself under the tutelage of former Olympian weightlifter Ava. After a tearful confrontation with her parents, Sam heads to the HPC, where she bonds with fellow athletes from other countries training in various sports. But while professional coaching from Ava brings Sam closer to her goals, self-doubt depicted as a mocking, shadowy figure, and the deal she made with her parents jeopardize her efforts. Emotive cartooning, rendered using bold lines and vibrant, saturated hues, captures the precise, fluid motions and kinetic atmosphere of Sam's intense training. Appealing, distinctly wrought characters, portrayed with various abilities, body types, and skin tones, energize the story's organic emotion, humor, and action. It all combines into a gold medal performance. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is No Place on Earth by Andrea Beatriz Arango. Forced to move to Yellowstone for his mother's job, a nervous tween grapples with uncertainty in this empathetic, lightly speculative novel from Arango. 11-year-old Gustavo Santos Costa is worried about leaving Puerto Rico for a national park that's home to dangerous wildlife. His family, particularly his father, teases him for his sensitive nature, which manifests in frighteningly realistic nightmares and the feeling of what he calls chapiness in his stomach. Worse still, the dreams have gotten more intense since the move to Wyoming, and unnervingly, Gustavo's aloof new classmate Cordell starts appearing in them. Cordell, who is black, uses lucid dreaming to cope with depression. As such, he's irritated by their merging visions. It's difficult for him to enjoy the peace of riding Dreamscape Bison while Gustavo worries about getting hurt. Despite his frustrations, Cordell helps Gustavo acclimate to lucid dreaming by providing tips on how to control his visions and offering an alternate name for his chapines, anxiety. Cordell's appreciative verse accountings of their nightly encounters occasionally alternate with Gustavo's pragmatic, self-aware narration, which is peppered with Spanish words and phrases. Attentively rendered characterizations enrich this moving tale of friendship and mental health awareness. This book is recommended for ages 10 and up. Next is Bite Me by Jennifer Dugan and illustrated by Kit Seaton. Collaborators Dugan and Seaton team up in a whirlwind, sapphic, supernatural graphic novel about a recently turned vampire and the girl who's hunting her. The same night that high school senior Poe gets the courage to rekindle her relationship with former flame Jolie, a pair of vampires attack and turn Poe. When Jolie happens upon the scene, Poe urges her to run, only for Jolie, accompanied by her monster hunter uncle, William, to kill the vampires and Poe. However, a few days later, Poe awakens in a buried coffin. Realizing she somehow survived the event, Poe digs herself out of the grave and finds refuge with members of a local vampire nest, who teach her how to control her newfound bloodlust and collectively relocate to a new town to escape Jolie and Uncle William's crosshairs. After learning about a rash of mysterious killings in her hometown that could once again threaten the nest, Poe sets off on an investigation, which soon leads to an unexpected reunion with Jolie that ignites within Poe a thirst for revenge. Poe's sharply observant internal monologue propels a paranormal murder mystery plot populated by visually diverse characters whose personalities are conveyed via organic dialogue and distinct designs. Shifting color palettes set the mood as peach-hued flashbacks reference Poe and Jolie's past romance. Noir atmosphere attends action sequences, and warm yellows suggest cheery interpersonal moments. The result is a sardonic take on vampire mythos. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. The final title this week is The Harrow Home for Wayward Girls by Jessica Spotswood. The renovation of a former maternity home in 1947, Greeley, Maryland, stirs up dark secrets and paranormal phenomena in this immersive ghost story from Spotswood. When 17-year-old Grace Harrow's parents sell Harrow Home for Wayward Girls to a rich hotelier, the family is hired to manage and operate the property. Grace dreams of escaping the establishment, as well as her domineering father and older boyfriend, to attend college, until she meets the new owner's daughter, 17-year-old bisexual Rose Thorpe, who's visiting for the summer. After Grace and Rose realize they've both been seeing a haunting image of a screaming dark-haired girl around the property, they launch an investigation into Harrow Home's checkered past, as the apparition exacts bloody vengeance on men she deems abusive. The new companions race to uncover her identity and put her to rest. Perceptive, unwavering prose portrays societal expectations in post-World War II America surrounding gender roles, bodily autonomy, and emotional and physical abuse, with candid nuance. Through Grace and Rose's steadfast partnership, this searing novel considers how friendship empowers women and facilitates moments of resistance, particularly as Rose faces stigma relating to her sexuality. It's a complex and haunting tale that makes room for hope and optimism. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. That covers the new releases for this week. Next, we'll be taking a look at some news. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Fair podcast, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at Book Fair Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. Following on Patreon is free and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to help the Book Fair podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Next, let's take a look at some news. Starting in Kentucky, where course materials provided to students included AI-generated gibberish. Last week on the Book Fair podcast, we covered a school district in Colorado that purchased course supplies made for Texas schools that featured errors. And in that same time, a second story has blown up from Kentucky with a school handing out worksheets that feature a map labeling the state as Vaneki. Jefferson County Public Schools charged guardians a $10 instructional fee to provide workbooks and study guides. Farnsley Middle School, as of now, is the only confirmed school that is using said materials. Administrators sent an email to teachers warning about a lot of mistakes on pages 19 through 36, telling teachers to remove those pages before students take them home. On top of a map with garbled state names, there was a periodic table of elements that included illegible text for just about every element on the page. The principal for Farnsley Middle School sent an email to notify parents of inaccurate information. However, parents argue that this had to be from a lack of a review process for these workbooks and study guides to make it into students' hands with these mistakes. Publicly available procurement documents from JCPS list multiple vendors for instructional supplies, including Curriculum Associates LLC, Discovery Education Incorporated, Accelerate Learning Incorporated, and Catapult Learning LLC. Though the district has not disclosed which vendor provided the AI-generated materials. Our next story comes from Missouri, where one individual retaliated against the library board's decision to ban the pride flag by filing a formal challenge against the King James Version of the Bible. A conservative library's ban on LGBTQ pride flags has backfired after a patron hit back by using its own rules to advocate for the Bible to be removed from shelves. Brian Rorda of St. Peters, Missouri, argued that the book should be removed from St. Charles City County Library's branches due to the prevalence of violence in the text. Rorda cited his motion came after a board meeting over a decision to ban the LGBTQ pride flag. In the March meeting, the Board of Trustees refused to extend public comment beyond the 30 minutes to accommodate a large line of people who turned out to oppose the decision. Rorda said, quote, "The library trustees have all the time in the world to listen to people wanting to ban books, but they didn't even have the decency to extend the time to hear those of us wanting to speak. I just want equal time as book banners." End quote. The initial challenge was filed on June 30th, which prompted a library committee review for the Bible. They voted to retain the book in the adult nonfiction collection. However, Rorda appealed the committee's decision, escalating his request to the library's Board of Trustees. This is contrast to a story we covered last week, which saw a Massachusetts bill that protects library access by allowing individuals to appeal a committee's decision to remove a title, as opposed to appealing the decision to keep one, which empowers advocacy groups to constantly challenge and push for removing books they find inappropriate based on personal beliefs. The request has now been reviewed by the library's internal committee, then advanced to the library's Board of Trustees for review. Unsurprisingly, the board voted to keep the King James Version of the Bible within the library's collection. Our next story comes from Georgia, where the state's governor is taking drastic action against a school board facing budgeting hardships. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has suspended all 7 members of Dublin City Schools Board of Education as the district works to recover from a $20 million deficit that prompted state financial assistance and put its accreditation at risk. Kemp signed an executive order on August 17th, suspending the entire board after the Georgia Board of Education unanimously recommended the action. Dublin City Schools has taken steps to reduce expenses, including eliminating dozens of staff positions and shortening its school calendar. A temporary school board, headed by Georgia Board of Education member Matt Donaldson, has been appointed. The suspension marks the latest state action involving the district after its financial problems led to emergency assistance and aforementioned staff and schedule reductions. While the action by Governor Kemp points to a mishandling of the budget, a greater question should be raised of whether we are properly funding schools in the state of Georgia, and within the United States as a whole. The current proposed budget of $14.2 billion for the state's public schools is roughly a $500 million increase from the previous year. However, this places Georgia's per-student spending at $15,897, just about $2,000 below the national average. Our next story comes from Texas. Turning Point USA challenges Lubbock Independent School District on age-appropriate books. A Lubbock-based chapter of Turning Point USA, founded by the late Charlie Kirk, has turned its sights on Lubbock ISD over books the group says contain material inappropriate for students. At a news conference, members from Turning Point USA gathered to ask Lubbock ISD to act more quickly and proactively to remove books they consider to be sexually explicit, harmful, or unsuitable for students, borrowing language from the state's school book ban law, SB 13. The district responded that its policies follow state law and provide a formal route for parents, students, and school staff to challenge any library materials that they have a concern about. At the event, Turning Point highlighted 3 titles claimed to be available to LISD students and argued that they should not be in school libraries. The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jesse Andrews, and Crank by Ellen Hopkins. These are titles that are often found in high schools and are included as optional reading for advanced placement courses, though Turning Point USA claimed that some of these books were available to students as young as 11. The conservative group also announced plans to keep pressure on the district through organized attendance at future school board meetings, support for parents challenging materials, and a grievance to the Texas Attorney General's office. With the rise in book bans throughout the United States, it comes along with an increase in both legal and violent threats against school and public library staff. With last year's assassination of Turning Point USA's founder, Charlie Kirk, the division between the political left and right is seeing an increase in hostility, and pointing this aggression towards teachers and librarians is only going to see an increase in threats against school staff. Lubbock ISD held a special board meeting to discuss books referenced by Turning Point USA's conference. Some parents said these books can help students learn about real-life situations and topics they'll eventually have to navigate as they get older. After public comment, the board held a vote on the fate of the titles. A few were removed from middle school libraries, and all of them will remain in high school collections with near-unanimous votes. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl was the most contested, with a vote of 5-2 to remain in high school libraries. The language used in this article from everythinglubbock.com lists its status as kept out of middle school library, which implies that the book was only available to upper grade levels. 4 of the 8 titles were removed from middle schools, but all will remain in high school. Having some books removed from middle schools is probably the furthest I can see some of these titles going. Having public hearing and a vote by the school board on their removal is following the current policy set by the Texas Board of Education under SB 12. Whereas other states will include an independent review of staff and volunteers from the community. Another story from Texas, where Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is proposing penalties for schools that keep vulgar books on library shelves. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick vowed to pass legislation punishing public schools that do not remove graphic books from shelves by reducing their rating on the state's annual performance review, which the state uses to seize control of underperforming districts. During a press conference, Patrick said, quote, "It's the law and we expect you to follow the law. So we're coming for the books. We ask that you do it on your own and remove these books." End quote. After SB 13 passed last year, school boards were given authority to approve and remove books based on complaints they receive from parents or activist groups. But Patrick said that an overwhelming majority of school boards have not taken any actions. Despite the nature of SB 13 leading to removal of books, Patrick pushes the conservative lie that the state is not banning books. Quote, "There are no books banned in America. You can buy any book you want to buy if you want it, but we do not take taxpayer money and buy these books for our schools." End quote. The frightening part of this proposal is that the state of Texas can seize control of schools that are failing if their rating falls low enough. And offering that control to the state based solely on the presence of LGBTQ+ books would lead to state-appointed administrators and board members using personal bias to shape the collections available in school libraries. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick claimed that more than 90% of parents would not want their kids seeing the books he highlighted in his press conference, which included award-winning contemporary novel Push, Crank by Ellen Hopkins, and a book I've never heard of, Boy Toy by Barry Lyga, which features themes of sexual abuse. Patrick's own words should be a chilling reminder of how far conservatives are willing to take this battle of censorship. We are coming for the books. On the Book Fair podcast, we talk endlessly that schools have a proper channel for challenging material available to students. Books are purchased from vendors in bulk, and sometimes titles that are not appropriate for a specific age group may find their way onto the shelf. But the threat of punishment from the state makes it clear. The problem is not whether a parent or school staff member has or has not raised a formal complaint. It is that the lieutenant governor personally objects to the content of these books, regardless of the literary or social value they offer to students. Books like Speak by Laurie Hulse Anderson depict sexual assault, but they also empower young readers. Silencing these stories takes away a powerful resource that victims of abuse use to find the strength to report. Finishing on positive news, heated rivalry author Rachel Reed donates $300,000 to 5 rural libraries facing closure. Coming off the heels of last week's story, where a Canadian library estimated that complying with new provincial regulations would require a $100,000 increase to its annual budget, Nova Scotia author Rachel Reed has donated $300,000 to the Annapolis Valley Regional Library after hearing 5 branches were set to permanently close. While Nova Scotia is not impacted by the legislation covered last week, the library system has been fighting against financial struggles already. Last month, the Annapolis Valley Regional Library allocated half of its reserve funds to keeping 5 of its branches open until the end of September before closing those branches. The library board had asked for $351,000 in funding earlier this year to keep libraries in Hantsport, Kentville, Lawrencetown, Port Williams, and Middleton open until the end of the fiscal year. Only a third of the money was committed, leaving a $200,000 shortfall, which is where Rachel Reed, author of Heated Rivalry, swept in with a generous donation to keep these branches open. Reed said, quote, "I had to do it, because I don't know what the point is of being a successful author in Nova Scotia if you're not going to use it for good." End quote. In an interview with Radio Canada, Library Chief Executive Julia Merritt said that Reed's donation will sustain the 5 branches through the end of the 2026-27 fiscal year. The funding will be used almost exclusively for staffing costs for the branches. In a news release, the library said that the donation is one of the most significant private gifts in its history. Merritt also said, quote, "This is an incredibly generous gift, and we are profoundly grateful to Rachel for choosing to invest in libraries, the Annapolis Valley, and the people our libraries serve." End quote. Rachel Reed said, quote, "I just think that they are such important services to communities that goes way beyond free books and access to different magazines and things like that. I don't think I'd be an author without my local library." End quote. Reed hopes her donation will bring more awareness to funding concerns for public libraries. This will conclude another episode of the Book Fair podcast. Coming this Friday, we will have an interview with author and illustrator Sandra Magsamen. If you'd like to stay up to date with the show, you can follow wherever you are currently listening or on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. If you'd like to help the Book Fair podcast grow, you can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair. Following on Patreon is free, and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. You can find links to news sources as well as episodes posted early. Simply add the RSS feed to your preferred podcast platform. Of course, the best way to help the Book Fair podcast grow is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.